Hello, my beautiful doves. My name is Mina, and someone recently called me their favorite yapper, which I'm taking as the highest form of compliment. So yeah, if you're new here, I yap about fashion, media, and culture on this channel. Also, if you're old here, if you're a returning viewer and you're like, Mina, what happened to your voice? It's so sickening. I'm not sick. I'm just super congested because I have allergies, and because March is spring now, thank you climate change, I'm getting allergies way sooner than normal. And also my meds are taking a bit to kick in, so we're just dealing with this for now. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the privilege of being able to exist offline, the romanticization of the solitary artist in the face of Oscar campaigning.
Are you aware of the disappointed Cillian Murphy meme on the internet?
The what?
The disappointed Cillian Murphy meme.
What's a meme?
And the hatred for influencers. Two things have happened that are related to this video inception. One, on the fashion front, everyone was just losing their shit over the row banning the use of phones during their Paris Fashion Week show last month. And two, in the Hollywood circuit, people continue to make fun of Austin Butler for being cringe. And I think the latest method acting news for him is that he had to hire an accent coach to relearn how to speak his normal voice post Elvis.
I mean, I had a dialect coach just to help me not sound like Elvis.
Oh, wow.
In that film.
Wow.
Why don't we just try saying your name? Austin.
Elvis.
Austin.
Austin.
No.
I'll get all into that in due time, but let's get started. Care of offers a curated set of products that are designed to work with research-based ingredients and optimal doses. They also have an app that helps you track how you're feeling and provide you insights so that you can adjust your routine whenever you need to. So this is my vitamin pack. They have lots of vitamins to offer, but if you take their quiz online, you can get personal recommendations based on your circumstances. In my pack, I have the multivitamin plus iron pill. It just helps fill gaps in my nutrition because admittedly, I'm not the best at maintaining a healthy, balanced diet with my meals, so I just feel better knowing that I'm taking vitamins daily at least. I also take rhodiola, which is this adaptogenic herb to help my body adapt to stress because I work for myself and that comes with its own stresses. I feel like it's a common thing where you know you're supposed to take vitamins, but you don't really know why. And what I really like about Care of is they have all these research guides online so you can really delve into the benefits that have been tested and see if any of that is something that you want to put in your own body. Take Care of's quiz to find out what's recommended for you and use my code MINALIFE50 for 50% off subscription items in your first order. So as I said, during Paris Fashion Week, the luxury brand The Row made headlines for banning phones. Prior to the show start, guests were sent this email. We kindly ask that you refrain from capturing or sharing any content during your experience. In place of phones, guests were provided notebooks to jot down their comments. And afterwards, dozens of journalists and TikTokers published think pieces on what this meant. It was elitist. It was quiet luxury snobbery. It was a marketing ploy. It was a commentary on our inability to live in the moment, etc. The reason why some people criticized this move was because not allowing photos and videos could be seen as an act of gatekeeping. Granted, official photos were released later, but I think it's important to note that social media has democratized the fashion industry in a really profound way. Because fashion shows have always been and still are invite-only events, so for many people, seeing a show through someone else's phone screen may be the only way that they can experience the show. Plus, many creators also give behind-the-scenes looks, unboxing the elaborate invitations, and show outfits, and going to the venues. Also, The Row sells at some of the highest price points seen today in ready-to-wear and is the poster child for the quiet luxury aesthetic. For anyone unfamiliar with this brand, I highly suggest that you go onto their website and, experience that shock for the first time. Their anti-phone move can thus be more easily interpreted as a way to preserve high fashion for the elite. It can also just be like an annoyance for editors and journalists who need to cover the show. Fashion editor Vanessa Friedman, who attended the show, was frustrated by this move, writing on Twitter, "I don't believe that taking photos interferes with my ability to fully consider what I'm seeing, and I believe I'm old enough to decide that for myself." For people who work in fashion and are not just there to simply look at pretty clothes, having no access to their phones makes the work more tedious. It's just faster to jot down notes via an iPhone keyboard than to chicken scratch on pen and paper, I'm sorry to say, even though, I do love analog stuff. It's just also easier to remember the clothing pieces that you want to write about if you have images of them from the moment. And, I don't usually do like fashion show reviews, but whenever I do a costume review of a movie, I'll watch the movie, and as I'm watching the movie, I'll watch on my laptop. And I'll take screenshots of every single costume that appears in the movie that I think is like noteworthy. And yes, it does take from the full experience of watching something, but I'm working, and reviewing screenshots afterwards helps me see similarities or differences between costumes and characters. It also lets me see the sequence of when costumes cropped up and how that relates to storytelling. And honestly, it's just easier for me to remember what's going on if I'm taking the screenshots myself versus looking up high-res screen caps of the movie afterwards. Though sometimes if I find myself like really enjoying the movie, I'll just watch it straight through and then do the whole screen cap thing in my second watch. However, I also want to add that The Row was founded by the Olsen twins, who are notoriously private individuals. They rarely give interviews, they don't have personal Instagram accounts, at least public ones, and their attitude towards privacy carries over to their branding as well. The Row's dedicated Instagram account posts sporadically and mainly images of artworks to inspire rather than products to promote. Writer Adelaide Girasoli also notes that ironically, despite the brand's low profile, TikTok and social media have become obsessed with it. In recent months, The Row has experienced a wave of growing popularity. In conjunction with the rise of quiet luxury, celebrities like Jennifer Lawrence, who've been photographed repping the brand, and via its line of men's bags that have been championed by It Boys Jacob Elordi and Harry Styles. The Olsen's decision to leave phones at the door could be them just trying to rein the brand back to its more, for lack of a better word, quiet luxury roots. And as Girasoli writes, taking control of the narrative of their product, designed for those who can buy a €5,000 coat without their heart or wallet skipping a beat, ultimately isn't so unfair. Their anti-phone agenda can thus be seen as an even bigger flex. They don't need social media publicity to make money or build brand loyalty, as is the case with most other corporations, even the luxury ones. For example, Loewe used TikTok to celebrate and publicize the artisans behind their creations, and smaller brands like Coperni, Elena Velez, among countless others, have had to rely on borderline gimmicky spectacles to create buzz. It reminds me of the Substack essay read on friend of the channel, Avery Trufelman's Articles of Interest Substack, which I highly recommend for any fashion history lovers, along with her podcast, which is just so research dense while being entertaining. Love Avery. Anyway, Avery featured a guest writer, Marie Mirage. I tried to look up the pronunciation of her last name and I couldn't find that pronunciation, so I apologize to any Danish people. But anyway, Marie wrote about how smartphones have changed the fashion show, and she wrote, arguably, the smartphone might have brought more depth, movement, and tactility to the clothes moving down the runway. Thanks to video, the algorithmically preferred content, we can all watch the runway as the light changes. The model turns around, we can watch what she looks like to the viewer sitting off to the side. It's no surprise that, as fashion shows became more Instagrammable, they had to provide more action. They became social media spectacles. While admittedly designers have presented experimental shows way before the smartphone, Marie explains, the phone has turned the attention away from the laser beam of the runway and onto the showgoer. If we look at Jacquemus's Fall 2023 show, for instance, guests arrived in pairs and rode to their places in little white boats that docked along the runway. All of this is to say that in some shows, it feels like the clothes play a supporting role, especially when these shows put trending influencers in the front row that have little to no previous relationship with the brand or even the fashion industry at large. Sabrina Bassoon, also known as Tube Girl, who became a sensation after posting TikTok videos of her dancing on the London Tube, was folded into the industry almost immediately post going viral. For example, she walked MAC Cosmetics' The Face Show event and the Christian Cohen runway show. She also attended the Balmain, Courrèges, and Alessandra Rich shows, all during her first fashion month. I have no personal hate towards Sabrina, as a disclaimer. I liked her Subway videos, and I'm always gonna root for an Asian queen, okay? Unless they say something crazy, you can write that on my grave. But some people online criticized her ascent into the high fashion space because they couldn't see the link between energetic dancing and high fashion. This is not a new conversation, by the way. I remember when Emma Chamberlain and the Dolan twins first got invited to the Louis Vuitton show, people were clamoring in the comments about how they didn't deserve to be there because they were not fashionable enough. But the hard pill to swallow is that it doesn't matter if a creator or celebrity likes fashion, because these brands are just looking for someone who can draw more eyeballs to them in a super oversaturated industry. Plus, fashion is very niche, and these lifestyle influencers have the advantage of having a reach that can draw in new consumers into the fashion space. And as just an example of successful influencer marketing, Madeline Argy, who has about 5 million followers on TikTok last time I checked, attended the Tory Burch show during New York Fashion Week and drove $289,000 in media impact value. In comparison, Emma Roberts, an actress who has almost 21 million followers on Instagram, drove $177,000 in MIV at the same show, a little more than half of Argy's impact. The reason that celebrities were invited to the front row in the first place was because of their star power, or advertising power. Think Audrey Hepburn advertising for Givenchy. But times are changing and celebrities may not be as powerful in the advertising front as top influencers. Of course, the top dogs like Dior and Gucci still have notoriously higher barriers to entry for their shows, but that might be because they feel they don't need as much social media press because they have pretty well-known reputations already. Also, not to sound shady, because I love many of these brands, but some legacy high fashion brands I think are also a bit more traditionalist in their marketing. For example, I used to be signed with a top modeling agency, and now, keyword is used to though. And one of the scouting agents from that agency was once solicited by this massive TikToker back in 2020, and the agent said no, she didn't want this TikToker to be signed because she didn't like TikTokers. And a year later, everyone in the office was like, WTF, we could have made so much money off that girl. In comparison, smaller brands kind of have to fill their front row with influencers because that's how they get viral. That's how they make money. That's how they jumpstart a successful business. And most smaller brands present during New York Fashion Week, which is why every season we get the same discourse about how New York Fashion Week sucks because it's overrun by influencers and the real fashion girlies go to Paris and Milan. Look, I've attended New York Fashion Week for a few seasons, and yes, there are definitely influencers who are entitled and who don't really care about what they're watching. But I do think the discourse that comes up literally every 6 months is really exhausting and overplayed at this point. And a lot of it is just like over-emphasizing like what's actually happening. For example, last September, there was rage bait about influencers like the Ariana Grande impersonator walking runway shows and taking jobs from models. And of course, people were commenting that New York Fashion Week is dead and these influencers can't walk and I can't believe they're like replacing models, etc. The show that Miss Ari impersonator walked in was the Creators Inc. show, which was not on the official New York Fashion Week calendar. And the whole premise was for influencers to walk because it's a talent agency putting on the show. It was like a gimmicky thing, not a representation of New York Fashion Week. It reminds me of this Rachel Tashian article for the Washington Post last September. In it, she talks about how most influencers are not actually going to shows on the official calendar. As an example, Chanel set up a pop-up event in Williamsburg to celebrate their new perfume during New York Fashion Week. But many of the attendees weren't invited to the official actual Chanel fashion show in Paris. To be invited to an actual fashion show, you have to either have the connections to a PR team or just way higher of a follower count. But it probably doesn't matter at the end of the day because most of these influencers' followers aren't clocking the differences between a front row seat and a perfume presentation invite. And therefore, brands like Chanel are still able to profit off of these influencers' followings while still reserving their front row for more prestige guests. But the idea that privacy is more elite is not just a fashion industry concept. If we look at my favorite actor du jour, Cillian Murphy, part of his charm is the fact that he is so offline and private.
You know there's a chunk of your hair for sale for 7K?
Nope.
Straight off the set from Peaky Blinders.
Right. Sounds a bit expensive.
The Olsen twins, as I mentioned earlier, have that similar charm for being offline. Ashley Olsen even had a baby last year, and there was virtually no news about it. Raven Smith wrote about the lack of baby announcement for Vogue. We cannot deny that this is extremely chic. Chicness is, of course, amorphous, hard to pin down to a sum of parts, at once mystical and tangible. But the less the Olsens give us, the more we want. Their privacy is the ultimate luxury. While being an offline celebrity seems like it's especially subversive given all the Kardashian-esque type of stars out there who profit on every single life event, the allure of privacy has actually been a thing for a while. Greta Garbo, for instance, was an intensely private movie star of the 1930s era. She avoided all industry functions, interviews, movie premieres, award shows, and never replied to fan letters.
I want to be alone.
She even won the Academy's Honorary Award, that's a tongue twister, in 1954, and she didn't even show up to receive it, so the Academy had to mail it to her. She retired early in 1941 and lived in Manhattan, where she inspired the act of Garbo watching among the public who hoped to catch just a glimpse of her taking a long walk. For stars of today, one way for them to avoid the public is to hang out in an exclusive membership club. The one that I became obsessed with reading about was the San Vicente Bungalows in Los Angeles, though they're reportedly opening another location in New York City. As part of the club protocol, members and guests have to sign a code of conduct contract upon entry. Phone usage is discouraged, and guests of members get their phone lenses covered with a sticker to further deter any photographs. Tracy Ellis Ross explained the appeal to a New York Times reporter in 2019. I know there's sort of an eye roll about the exclusivity. It feels privileged and all that. But at the same time, there's this real need in Los Angeles for a place where you can go and be a private person and take off the celebrity part of yourself at the door. Privacy is such a big deal for this club that in 2021, a guest of a member actually leaks that Justin and Hailey Bieber were there, and the member who brought this guest was immediately terminated. Which I would be so embarrassed if I brought my friend and they literally got my membership removed. Just saying, in 2019, it was reported there were 7,000 people on the waiting list and the capacity was 3,000 people. And once you're off, you're definitely not getting back on, but just even if they didn't have that policy, there's no way you would get back on because there's 7,000 other people who want in. And apparently people who live in New York City and London who don't even have a residence in LA were trying to get memberships to the club. Yeah, if I was a member there, I would never bring a guest. But while I can understand wanting to be in a space that's vetted and safe and without paparazzi, these clubs can also have negative effects for society as a whole. For example, if you're able to get all your wonderful amenities through either your own private domain or via an exclusive membership club, you invest way less effort in trying to improve the city you actually live in. Why give the public parks any money when you can just put all your money in a private garden? This is the same issue I have with the concept of country clubs and gated communities. I actually stumbled across this article from 2016 covering the gated communities cropping up in Hanoi, Vietnam, though, obviously gated communities happen in every single country. Urban Studies professor Lisa Drummond said in this article, "These gated communities remove a group of people from active everyday engagement in the city. They take that group of people and allow them to withdraw from the city behind walls, to have their own private facilities in an economically homogeneous space. Because, of course, money buys entry to that space, so only those with money can be there." The gated communities in Hanoi also advertise themselves as being peaceful oases and boast lush private gardens, tennis courts, private schools, private hospitals, among many other amenities. And they're able to get this much space through gentrification. One community project named Echo Park experienced repeated protests from local communities who had lost their rice fields and farmland due to its expansion. This idea of reconnecting with nature and abandoning phones is actually a deceptively wealthy person mindset. As an example, Walter Isaacson, author of Steve Jobs, told the New York Times in a 2014 interview that the Jobs household was a fairly tech-free one, even though this man literally sold us the iPhone. Isaacson said, "Every evening, Steve made a point of having dinner at the big long table in their kitchen, discussing books and history and a variety of things. No one ever pulled out an iPad or computer. The kids did not seem addicted at all to devices." But given all the articles and books written about how bad iPhones and iPads and social media are for children, it's no surprise that those who have the time and means to be reading these books and staying up to date with child development news would start scaling back their kids' phone usages. The most recent article I've read on it was published in The Atlantic earlier this month. The writer, Jonathan Haidt, wrote a pretty long, comprehensive article about everything wrong with children being on phones today. But in short, more time spent on phones means less time spent on face-to-face interaction. And when we're unable to have enough real-world interaction as kids, when our brains are still developing, it inevitably affects our ability to form friendships, to date, to come to our sexuality, to exercise, to sleep, to do well in academics, to understand politics, to essentially form our own identities. But Haidt also covers the initial appeal of handing a child an iPad. He writes, touchscreen devices were also a godsend for harried parents. Many of us discovered that we could have peace at a restaurant, on a long car trip, or at home while making dinner or replying to emails if we just gave our children what they most wanted, our smartphones and tablets. We saw that everyone else was doing it and figured it must be okay. Parents who can't afford extra help like a nanny or babysitter also might feel more compelled to hand their kid an iPad just to get a break for a few hours in the day. I actually have a friend who's a babysitter, and she was hired by this wealthy family to basically take care of an infant for a couple hours every day. And I asked her, I was like, isn't that like interesting how this family like trusts you, no offense, to take care of this literal like newborn baby? And she said, well, actually both parents are home and the mother is actually on maternity leave, but she just like is tired and she doesn't want to take care of this baby like all day long. And that's totally fair. I'm like not shaming that desire to just want a couple hours to nap to yourself, but it is like a place of privilege to be able to literally be on leave, paid leave, and then on top of that, hire someone to help you take care of your child. And this class pattern of technology use also like moves into teenagehood as well. According to 2018 research by Common Sense Media, lower income teenagers spend an average of 8 hours and 7 minutes a day using screens for entertainment, while higher income peers spend 5 hours and 42 minutes. By the way, this study counted each screen separately, so a child texting on a phone and watching TV for 1 hour counted as 2 hours of screens being used. 2 studies that look at race have found that white children are exposed to screens significantly less than African American and Hispanic children. As Nellie Bowles wrote for the New York Times in 2018, it could happen that the children of poorer and middle-class parents will be raised by screens, while the children of Silicon Valley's elite will be going back to the wooden toys and the luxury of human interaction. We even see this trend in schools. For example, the Waldorf School of the Peninsula, which is a private school that is popular among Silicon Valley executives, bans most screens. Meanwhile, the nearby public Hillview Middle School has a one-to-one iPad program. It's interesting though, because at the same time as all this social media addiction, there's also been a rise in the group chat medium over the past year or so. Head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, even said that teens are spending more of their time on the apps in their DMs than they do on stories or on the feed. Many people theorize that the move towards group chats is because people are tired of producing content, of sharing their lives so publicly, and instead trying to curate more selective communities again in the same vein as the old internet when we had forums and instant messaging. As just an aside, I was definitely like still really young, but I experienced forums and instant messaging, and I just remember like how nice it was to be able to say BRB or GTG, and the messages would just stop afterwards. Like, oh my God, if you don't know, I don't know how young my demographic goes, but BRB is be right back and GTG is got to go. The nice thing is that for an instant messaging situation, you would log in and then people would see that you were online and then they would start messaging you. Most people would not message someone if that person was like offline. And so you're not getting like inundated with text like throughout the entire day. It's only when you have opened yourself to receiving, like you're in the headspace to want to receive communication. And I think that's beautiful. What all this means to me at the end of the day is that privacy is something that everyone right now is seeking across the board, regardless of income status. And that's probably why when celebrities are able to achieve it so successfully, it makes them worthy of awe. It also gives the illusion that they never wanted to be famous. They're just so good at their art, their acting, their music, that fame was just predestined for them. It's even more impressive when compared to the countless celebrities and influencers who give off the vibe of attention seeker by posting multiple times a day. I read this BuzzFeed article highlighting 16 celebrities who don't use smartphones, and some of the people in the article claimed to not own a phone, period, like apparently Justin Bieber and Shailene Woodley. But even if they don't own phones at all, which for some reason I highly doubt, what they probably have are personal assistants who own phones, and they probably give out their assistant's number if someone asks for a way to contact them, and it ends up being their team who stays online and alert and tracking their metrics and trending topics, while they can relax and be zen and touch grass. Also, I feel like as a woman, I have grown addicted to my phone for reasons as everyone else, but also because I feel like unsafe if I'm going through the city not having a phone. Like, what if I get lost, or what if I get kidnapped or something? But I feel like the thing with a lot of these richer celebrities is that they can afford a driver and they can basically be chaperoned wherever they want. And so also the safety aspect of it is not as pressing. And then there's also celebrities like Timothée Chalamet, Jacob Elordi, among many others, who have social media accounts but follow 0 people on them, giving the illusion that they don't actually use their accounts. And obviously, I don't want to generalize. I'm sure some people who follow 0 people actually don't use Instagram and are not addicted. But I do remember listening, I don't know if it was a podcast episode or what it was, but in it, Emma Chamberlain talked about how she would spend 5 hours a day on Instagram. Meanwhile, she follows 0 people on her at least public Instagram account. So I'm like, just because you're not following anyone doesn't mean you're not using the platform. I also read this Vox article called Everyone's a Sellout Now, and in it, writer Rebecca Jennings talks about the history of the artist as a cultural phenomenon. Basically, ever since the late 18th and early 19th centuries, we've started to think of artists as these solitary oracles who exist on a higher spiritual plane than the rest of us. And that romantic mindset was exacerbated post-World War II when the US government institutionalized its cultural power through museums, graduate programs, art councils, and awards, meaning that more artists were able to survive just making art because they could apply for grants and residencies. On the pop culture side of things, writers and music artists started working with these new publishing houses and recording companies, so they didn't have to delve into the business side. They could just record their music in a cabin in upstate New York, or whatever music artists do to get inspiration. William Deresiewicz, author of The Death of the Artist, told Vox, before the internet came along, artists not only could let their companies worry about the money, but they actually didn't have a choice. The companies didn't let them. As I talked about in my recent book talk video, having control over your art and the way you're marketed can be empowering if you're someone who's already business savvy, knows your demographic really well, and, of course, there's lots of predatory management that you can avoid the trappings of if you just do it yourself. However, if you're someone who's more introverted or who doesn't spend a lot of time online, having to market yourself all by yourself can feel daunting and an unfair barrier to entry if your art is already really good. I've talked about Ricky Montgomery before in my musicals video, but Jennings quotes him in her article as well. Basically, he's a singer and he made a viral video lamenting over how he has to do all of these cringy TikToks because no one else would discover his music otherwise. It's less of a creative choice for him to want to do it. It's more like a necessity. Jennings also writes, despite the fact that for most people, the act of writing looks very boring, author content creators succeed by making the visually uninteresting labor of typing on a laptop worthwhile to watch. You'll see a lot of cottagecore-esque videos where the writer will sip tea by the fireplace against the soundtrack of Wes Anderson, or wake up in a forest cabin and read by a river, or women like this Oxford University student who dresses up like literary characters and films herself working on her novel. Videos like these emulate the romantic ideal of solitary genius artistry, evoking a time when writing was seen as a more pure or quaint profession. Yet, what they best represent is the current state of art, where artists must skillfully package themselves as products for buyers to consume. Literally this. I sometimes get comments from people asking me to vlog my research process, and the problem is I feel like when I'm researching and writing, it's actually incredibly boring to watch. Also, I'm always running on deadlines, so the idea of writing to curate a writing scene that's commodifiable enough for TikTok and for my own Libra sensibilities is an extra hour or two of my day that I don't really have. Anyway, these writing or art making scenes are subtle marketing tools. They are pulling you in to read this person's work or listen to this person's music because their video gives off the air that they are a true artist. There's also this long-standing idea that privacy is not just ideal for the true artist, but for the consumer of art as well. As Deresiewicz writes in his book, the modern person encountered themselves by encountering art through silent reading and aesthetic contemplation in the solitude of their own mind. I mean, how many times have we all just laid in bed listening to Lana Del Rey at 3 a.m. just, thinking about life? In contrast, the in-your-face marketing method, like the memified saying, "Did I just release the song of the summer?" is the total opposite of the solitary genius and makes us consider, why is this person trying so hard? Is it because their art isn't good enough to speak for itself? And you may be wondering, why don't all artists just go the more art-making scene route when they make TikTok content? And honestly, I think it's because The TikTok algorithm rewards people who like talk to the camera and who are more like in your face. So even though one way is a fine way to market, it's also just less likely to go as viral as someone who's like, hey guys, did I just release the song of the summer? So finally, let's talk about Austin Butler. There was a video going around on TikTok. Sorry I'm talking about TikTok all the time. I'm addicted to my phone, okay? Where Austin Butler was interviewed on the red carpet about his favorite childhood movie, and he said,
I love the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And this big creator criticized him for being pretentious, and he said that Austin should have just said Toy Story like the rest of us. The video was taken down because I think the Butler fans came for this person. But, you know, in general, I feel like Austin Butler has activated many people's distaste for tryhards ever since Elvis, when he refused to stop talking with his Elvis voice leading up to the Oscars. And, you know, there were claims that he actually couldn't stop because he method acted too close to the sun.
There's people out there who say that ever since I played Elvis, my voice has changed. But that's not true. I've always sounded like this, and I can prove it.
How excited are you to be Sebastian on the Carrie Diaries?
I'm really excited.
And then there were later claims that I mentioned earlier that he needed an accent coach to get him back to his regular voice. I personally, you know, I felt really weird about his accent claims at the time. They're difficult to fully believe, to be honest. But either way, the conversation many people are not ready for, and that I'm ready to have, is the fact that he slayed Elvis and he slayed the evil Baldy in Dune 2. And I think what's interesting and what's happening with Austin Butler that cannot be said about Jared Leto, who is similar in his method acting publicity antics, is that Austin is actually a good actor. He's good and he tries hard, and those are not mutually exclusive terms. And there's also nothing wrong with trying hard. Hot take. It was his first big role after sort of being a child star flop. Sorry, Austin. And he was Oscar nominated for it. I think that's incredibly exciting. And I don't think we should hold people getting excited about awards like against them. Most people just like the idea of the private celebrity because they feel this person is not trying to make people like them. They must be so good that their work speaks for itself. And on top of that, it seems like they're overtly trying not to succeed. So if they do succeed, it's a testament to their talent. I think this is also why, once again, Cillian Murphy, but also Renee Rapp and Dakota Johnson got so much fan favor this past year because of how openly blasé they were with the press and with having to market themselves and or their movies. But there's a certain privilege with being able to have this attitude. Jennings writes, the people rewarded for putting themselves out there are most often the same people society already rewards. Algorithms are biased against poor people, against people of color, against people who don't conform to patriarchal societal norms. As just a clear example of how being candid backfired, Rachel Zegler, who was cast as Snow White in the new Disney live-action movie, was the target of a harassment campaign after admitting that she didn't like the animated Snow White growing up.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
I mean, the new Snow White actress is literally walking around interview to interview just bashing Snow White. That actress is so smug and this movie's gonna flop.
And finally, I also think that feeling annoyed towards someone who is advocating for themselves too much is part of how our brains are wired. At least journalist William Storr seems to think so. Storr wrote a book called The Status Game, which is about the human pursuit of higher status and how it defines who we are. He explained to Glamour magazine that our behavior goes back to the hunter-gatherer period where there were mechanisms of maintaining equal status within the tribe. He said, if someone in one of those tribes acted in a big shot way, they get taken down. They get teased, bullied, and humiliated until they stopped and started behaving. So resentment and envy are fundamental parts of the human condition. This is not to say that advertising ourselves all the time is good for us either. The need to create a brand for ourselves is kind of dystopian, honestly. I also think it's very telling why some of the influencers who've made it through sharing a lot of their life decide to scale back once they realize they don't need to anymore for money. Emma Chamberlain comes to mind for sure, because I remember when she first stopped posting on YouTube every week, people were like, WTF, Emma has quit YouTube? And her comments had people demanding her to come back. She does still post, I think, just not at the same cadence as she used to. But I think it's honestly really hard to go from posting a lot to posting a little because people like Emma are really good at fostering these parasocial relationships with their followers. So obviously there's going to be some kind of backlash. Martin Cocker and Daunt wrote a piece about influencer gossip forums like Tattle Life, Guru Gossip, Gomi, and the Blog Snark subreddit, and noted that many of the users on there used to be fans of the influencers that they now criticize. As the authors write, establishing privacy can shatter the illusion of intimacy, prompting anger from followers who feel entitled to omitted information. They quote one forum user who wrote, "You can't share a relationship with your followers for the best part of 10 years, then not properly address the breakup. She set the boundaries and level of privacy in her life. She can't just suddenly shift them and not expect a reaction." Emma Chamberlain was actually interviewed by the New York Times last year, and she addressed some of the reasons why she scaled it back. She talked about her physical and psychological safety as being forms of anxiety she constantly dealt with. She said, "I'm terrified because I'm human and I'm not perfect, and who knows what people could find about me. Somebody could make up a lie about me tomorrow and ruin my life. I feel powerless about my own identity at times because I feel like it's in the control of the public. Sometimes it can feel like, ugh, do I even have a voice? I do, but are people listening to me, or do they just have an idea of who I am and that's stronger?" Other influencers like Jenna Marbles, the Dolan twins, and Elle Mills faded out of the public eye for similar reasons. And, who knows what kind of jobs they're doing right now, but I hope they're all happy. I just think it definitely hits lifestyle influencers the hardest, because I noticed with musicians that have come out of YouTube, like our favorite alumni, Justin Bieber. Just kidding, he wasn't really vlogging, but Troye Sivan and Conan Gray were both at least part-time YouTube vloggers, and they didn't experience too much backlash from establishing boundaries once their singing careers took off. And I think that's because, one, they're men. But two, prioritizing making art is considered worthy of praise, whereas prioritizing your mental health, sadly, is not. And I also think a lot of it has to do with the fact that once the art is made, it's meant to be shared and enjoyed by an audience at the end of the day. So fans do ultimately benefit from giving their favorites some space to write songs or to method act or whatever. I guess the point of this video is I want to unpack how privacy and elitism are intertwined, and also shed some understanding on why some artists are able to maintain a mystique, and how, while many artists want to, it's oftentimes not possible for everyone to be as offline as they'd like if they want to make a career doing art full time. I also just thought just now about an earlier part of my video when I talk about how people feel a certain way about influencers getting invited to Fashion Week. I feel like celebrities also get invited to Fashion Week who have no real interest in fashion, or who have a very random association with fashion. Like, Kyle MacLachlan walking for Prada. Maybe Kyle MacLachlan is really invested in fashion. I don't know. He was just the first celebrity that came to mind.
Replacing the quiet elegance of the dark suit and tie with the casual indifference of these muted earth tones. It's a form of fashion suicide, but call me crazy. On you it works.
Where it's like, this is really weird, but it's also camp because it's so weird. But an influencer walking for a fashion show would never be viewed as camp. And I think it's because of the halo effect that we have around celebrities, where we just assume because they're talented individuals for doing yada, 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 they must be they must have really good taste. They must be also really well-versed in fashion and whatnot. But I also think a lot of it has to do with just the prestige of privacy, and this idea that these more private celebrities are going to this fashion show because they truly support the brand. Whereas any influencer, even if they like that brand, who goes is clearly trying to plug themselves in some way. Anyway, that's the final thought. This is the end of the video. Let me know what you think. I really appreciate the kind of intellectual comments and discussions that people have below my videos, and I would just love to thank you all for being as smart and as kind as you are. So yeah, have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!